Welcome to the Fire and Earth podcast with your hosts, Jason Mefford and Kathy Gruver. Fire and Earth, giving you the keys to unlock your limitless potential.
Welcome to another edition of the Fire and Earth podcast. I'm your co-host, Jason Mefford.
And I'm Kathy Gruver, and we are so thrilled to be joined by a very special guest, my friend all the way from West Virginia, Jeanne Mozier. Woo!
Yay!
Almost heaven, West Virginia. Just had to throw that in there.
Absolutely.
We always have to sing. So what's so exciting about this, I've known Jeanne for years. She is the most incredible astrologer that I have ever met. Now, you probably listen, well, why are we having an astrologer on? Well, we're going to do a couple things. We're going to learn about how astrology works. We're going to learn about how you can use that in your business. And then in our next episode with her, we're going to talk about what's coming in 2019 so that you can plan your life. So Jeanne, thank you so much for being here. We're so excited to have you.
Well, it's very exciting to be here, Kathy.
Good. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how you even stepped into the world of astrology?
Well, I had an interview not too long ago, and someone said, well, how did you get into astrology? And I said, well, I learned it in prison. And I was working for the DC Department of Corrections, and an astrologer wanted to come in and talk to the women in prison. And my husband, who was working in an agency that dealt with the inmates, said, Jeanne, I think you should go hear this guy. So I went, and first of all, I was amazed because women in prison tend to have the attention span of a fruit fly. And these women were riveted to this guy for 45 minutes. I had never seen anything like it. So I thought, well, this is pretty interesting. I went to study with him, and it was really obvious to both of us from the very beginning that this is something I must have done before. It was very easy for me. My professional and academic background is as a research analyst. My first job was with the Central Intelligence Agency doing trends analysis. This was before I learned astrology. So I learned how they did it. And then when I learned astrology, it was like, oh, this is so much better because I can see the trends. I can say when they're going to start. I can say when they're going to end. And I can say what they're going to mean. So fortunately, I left the CIA before I learned astrology, or they probably would have never let me leave.
It's kind of like the men that stare at goats kind of thing, right? You would have gotten hauled back in some little back.
That's right. Sorry, you can't leave. We've got things for you to do.
Yeah.
So basically, even though I do personal charts, mostly what I'd like to do is to do trends analysis. And every year I do what I call my Oracles lectures, where I talk about what's coming up for the year to come. I also do a daily post on both Facebook and on my website about what I call the cosmic weather of the day. So it will talk about what kind of day it's going to be. I have hundreds of people who read it. And of course, here in Berkeley Springs, a small town, people will come up to me and go, I make my office mates read this every morning before we do anything. So that's sort of my short form, how I use astrology and how I got to be here.
Yeah, I read your daily little blurb every single day. Like, I wake up to that. I lay in bed and I read it, and I decide if I'm going to actually get up.
You're going to get out.
Because but I have to say, it's so freaking accurate. And, people are like, oh, it's so vague. It can apply to anybody. This is not your grab the Sunday newspaper and read it. This is like truly that, like arguments might happen this afternoon, and it's a good day for love, and dress wacky because it's a crazy day. It's like all this stuff tends to be so freaking accurate. And I know Jason is the slight because I've been doing this one since I was a kid. So as the slight skeptic in the room, do you have some questions for Jeanne?
Well, I do, and it's interesting because Jeanne, as you were explaining your background, right, and kind of how you came to this, because I've also had a very analytical background, kind of rooted in science and everything, and I know a lot of people And some people even listening, again, like Kathy said at the beginning, might be going, astrology, what the hell are you guys talking about, right? I thought this, what, right? But I mean, you came from a very scientific, research-based kind of background, and then, you know, kind of moved into this. And I think it's an interesting pathway that you went, but I think also, because one of the things that I try to do in my life is find different truths from different places.
Right.
And find ways of kind of combining them together, maybe in a little bit different way than other people had thought about.
Right.
And so I see this here, right? And again, like Kathy said, I'm a little bit of a skeptic. I don't open the Sunday paper and read the horoscope because, again, most of the time it seems like it's just BS, right?
Right. Me either.
Yeah, you don't either, right? Okay, all right. Hey, we're all on the same page.
None of us read it, so.
You know, because yeah, like you said, I mean, some of the stuff, it almost feels like shamsters, if you will, right? That are out there kind of, and I'm sure there's some people that are out there that are a little bit like that, but there has to be something to this.
Yes.
Right? Like we were talking about before we actually started. I mean, you know, one of my sister-in-laws is a nurse, and she spent a lot of time in the maternity ward. And there's certain times of the month when more women have babies. Okay, so there has to be something to kind of where everything is at. We may not totally understand it, and we can't maybe create scientific experiments to prove it, right? Kind of under the scientific method, or you're shaking your head like maybe we can too.
You know, when I can sit there and list my predictions and say, I was working in Washington at the time, and I know I was the only person working in Congress who said, this is the day the Berlin Wall's going to come down. And then I made that prediction 6 months before it happened, and it came down on that day. And it wasn't any message, it was looking at the stars. And it's a sort of an interesting case because the Berlin Wall went up on the same kind of aspect that it came down on, because astrology is very much about cycles. And here we are again in that same aspect, and here we are again dealing with a wall.
Okay, well, and it's interesting that you bring this up, okay, because I have an affinity for the Berlin Wall, because guess what? Before I went to Germany, I lived in Germany for a while. I actually got to travel to Berlin and go into East Germany because we had some military papers that allowed us to go in. And so I spray painted on the Berlin Wall. And it was probably, well, this would have been it was summer of '89. The wall came down in October.
Right, November.
Yeah, first like November 3rd or something like that, wasn't it? Okay.
Yeah.
And so there I was, almost literally 6 months before, spray painting on the wall my name and Idaho is free, because I lived in Idaho at the time, right?
That's great.
And so it's interesting because, like you said, there's life, I think, does go in cycles.
Right.
And sometimes the hard part for humans is we have a very finite view of the world, because we've only been around, us in particular, or even really well documented recorded history has only been around for a very short period of time, considering the millions and billions of years that we've been in existence, right? And so it's interesting, like you said, that the wall went up there and went down in one of those same cycles. Now we're in a similar cycle again, and we have people in this country talking about trying to put up a wall in Mexico. So again, this can't be coincidence, right? And yeah, I'm sure you didn't pick up the phone and call Gorbachev and say, hey, Gorby, on November 3rd, right? You need to drop the wall
down.
Open it up, open up the gates and let everybody out, right? But it happened that way. So, wow. Okay.
And Jeanne, let me ask you this, because I go in every couple of weeks to an astronomy company, and they use
Okay.
telescopes and such. And it's so funny because I spent my life saying astrology. So anytime
Right.
I would refer to them, it would automatically come out of my mouth, astrology, and it drove them crazy. And
Oh, yeah.
the other day, it's terrible. The other day I went to say astrology and I said astronomy, and they went, we changed you. And I'm like, crap. But for these, and there's one scientist in particular who, oh my God, he doesn't believe in chiropractic. He wants a double-blind, placebo-controlled study for everything. Because he's like, well, how do planets floating through space, how does that affect people? So how does it work? How does the aspects of these planets actually influence us?
Well, who knows? What I know is that it's a symbolic system.
Mm.
So, what you use the astronomy for, the actual positions of the planets and the movement of the moon, is to lay out the pattern that you then interpret using the symbolism of astrology. So do I think there are little beams that come down and twist everybody's hands during Mercury retrograde? No. Do I think that Mercury's actually moving backwards in the sky? No. It just appears to be doing that, and then you interpret it symbolically. So that's my answer to that. And what I say to most skeptics is, give me your birth data, and in 2 hours, I'll have you converted, because I'll tell you things that you would spend, 10 years on a psychiatrist's couch to deal with.
Yep. When you did my chart that first time, because Jeannie did my chart probably, boy, I don't know, 8-9 years ago in Berkeley Springs, it was you went through my childhood up to present, and you told me things of certain years, of certain dates, where I went, oh my God. Things that you wouldn't know, things that Jason wouldn't know. It was so bloody accurate. Now, I went in as a believer anyway, and my mind was blown. But like the year my mother died, and the year I had a bad breakup, and when I moved to California, you knew all of that.
Right.
And so I guess the question now is, okay, so we know this stuff. How do we use that personally moving forward in business and upping our potential? Because that's what we talk about.
I think it's I think there are a number of ways. And I had a friend just recently who was a newspaper journalist. And as we all know, newspapers tend to be cutting their staffs. She very surprisingly lost her job and was sort of pondering what she should do, what her time frame should be. And I said, look, do not make any decisions until Mercury goes direct at the end of March. Because anything you decide in that period is either not going to happen or it's going to have to be redone. I said, and then we can talk about what you should be doing and what the pattern seems to be. So, and we're getting ready to sell our movie theater here in Berkeley Springs, and had it all laid out. And the bank says, okay, well, this is the day we'll do a closing. I said, oh no, I want these people to succeed. This is the day we're going to do the closing. So there are good times for doing business. There are times that are not good for doing business because there are energies that are deceitful or that are vague or that, cause problems. So, that's, I think, one of the really basic ways I try to help people doing business. In terms of, what are you best at doing? Of course, that's what personal astrology does very well. As I like to tell people, if you're a Capricorn, you're never going to be a Gemini. So forget it. You're going to be hard-nosed. You're going to be practical. You're going to be very corporate. You're not going to be light and funny and pleasant and all of that stuff. So people need, I like to tell them that when I lay their chart down in front of them, this is the pattern you selected when you came into incarnation. And when you leave, that's what you're going to be judged and rated on, not some fantasy thing. They're going to say, how well did you embody the pattern that you were given?
Well, so I think it's interesting what you've just said there too, because on a couple of points, let me kind of bring up, at least that I got out of this too, right?
Okay.
Is that, like you said, when you're trying to sell the movie theater, and we've mentioned a couple times Mercury in retrograde, and now it's not, right? And now it's okay. Now it's okay. But I think I've seen in my life, right, where there's certain times when I've just been trying and I've been pounding and trying to get something to go, and it just won't go. It doesn't matter how hard I try, right? And so that's what you're talking about, is there's certain energetic type of times when it's okay to realize, hey, this isn't the best time to do this, but if I wait until this next month, it's okay. It's not me. It's not me personally. It's just what happens to be going on right now. And so just being more aware of some of those things can help us in deciding, when we do certain things or when we do not do certain things, right? I mean, it may be okay. It's like, hey, you know what? Just, you need to take the next week off because you're not really going to accomplish anything anyway. So go on vacation, right? And then come back, you'll have a fresh head, energy will be better, and then you can kind of move forward. And so to me, that was kind of like one little takeaway. But the other thing too, as you were talking about, Capricorn versus Gemini, right? Is, and I'm a Leo. Okay. Now, now you're like, oh man, I got you all figured out, right?
You're a Capricorn, Kathy?
Oh, honey, I'm such a Capricorn.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Such a Capricorn. Like triple Capricorn. Like, yeah.
But it's about trying to be ourselves, right? And like you said, is there's certain strengths that I have because of, again, maybe when I was born, but really kind of who I am as a person, right? And so there's certain strengths that I can bring to this world. I have certain weaknesses as well.
Right.
And I think it's, so many people talk about trying to overcome your weaknesses, but I think it's more effective to capitalize on your strengths.
Yes.
And find people to help you with your weaknesses.
Yes.
And backfill. And that's kind of what I'm hearing you say too, is it's like, it's all right to be yourself and be who you are. Yes. I don't necessarily like the word destined, but that kind of popped in my mind, but be who you're destined to be, as opposed to, again, trying to fight and become somebody else. Just be who you are, learn more about who you are, and then, again, unlock that part of your potential.
And of course, it's way more than just your sun sign. It's way more than you just being a Leo, because all the other planets are in your pattern too. And it may be that those other planets have more impact or have influence on how the Leo expresses itself. So that's why you can't go and read from the Sunday paper, because it's like just teeny little piece.
Yeah, and because that was going to be one of my questions, right? Is when I go and look at like the standard stuff about what a Leo is, right? I don't identify with everything,
right?
But it's obvious in reading through from different sources that yes, I'm predominantly that kind of a character person, however you describe it. So it's interesting to hear you say that it's not just the sun sign, but it's also some of the other things. And that's why maybe I don't fully identify with that particular thing, but there's a lot of me that's in there. Right.
Well, absolutely. And Jeannie, just as a side note, the reason we picked Fire and Earth podcast was our zodiacs.
Oh, yes, of course.
Fire and Earth. That's how we came up with it. We sat here for hours debating about the name of our thing, and I finally said, what sign are you? And I think Jeannie said, are you picking me up? And I said, no, I'm just, and we went with, I was like, that's fire and earth. Let's do that. That's why we picked this.
Right. And one of the things that's sort of a shorthand way is when you have a chart and you add it all up, you add all the planets and what signs they're in, and you find out that you are predominantly a fire person or predominantly an earth person, what you will find is those are the people you feel most comfortable with also. So that, if you're a fire person, that you like other fire people because it's all that energy. If you're a water person, you might be a little hypersensitive and find both of those fire people to be just a little too much for you, and those earth people sometimes to be a little too hard. So,
I was talking to somebody about you coming on astrology, and they said, well, what are you? And I said, oh, I'm like a triple Capricorn. I said, like, my sun sign's Capricorn, my rising is Capricorn, I think my moon's in Capricorn. I said, I have just enough Sag to keep me from killing myself. And they started laughing. I have that outgoing sense of humor that, so clearly there's other things in my chart that allow me to be the showman too.
Yes.
I'm very driven, I'm very type A, but I'm also the first one to crack a joke or tell a dirty story, or, it's like, so I have that aspect too, which, well, is it possible? Here's a good question. So I look at my chart and I go, oh my God, I have so much Capricorn. I'm so heavy. I'm so driven. I'm so type A. Can you be conscious enough to pull from other aspects of your chart and up your sadness?
Yes. And that's what I tell people is I like to give them the information so they could be like the conductor of an orchestra. And that sometimes you're going to bring in the horns, and sometimes you're going to bring in, the rhythm section. So yes. And it also means that, if you have, say someone has a Cancer moon, which is their emotional nature, but there are a lot of practical other stuff. Well, when they're at home, they tend to be softer. When they're around their intimate environment and the people in it, they tend to be softer. So it lets you understand what pieces of you have what strengths and weaknesses, as Jason was saying.
Yeah.
Well, and I was going to say, because it was interesting how you said, excuse me, softer at home, right? Because when you said that, it made me think, well, at work, they're probably harder. And so, because again, we have kind of these different little ecosystems that we live in during the day. And this is one of the things that I've seen too in business recently is a lot more people, I guess, being accepting or wanting people to be more themselves at work as well, right? Because when we tend to go into the business world, we think we have to be a certain way, and we try to mold to that, and we try to be let's take again, like you said, a Cancer who's maybe more soft. They go to work, they feel like they have to be hard, and they have to be the jerk, the asshole, the bitch, whatever label people put onto them, right? Because they're hard at work. And what's interesting to me, just psychologically, is when you're two different things, right, then you get cognitive dissonance. So it's no wonder that, those people that maybe have kind of that softer feel, when they're being hard and they know that's not who they are, right, that causes them some psychological issues. They're soft. They can probably jump into depression or other things more frequently because they're trying to be someone else at work, someone else at home, and it just kind of messes with them.
Well, what you will find almost inevitably, if you have strong Cancers in your office, they're the office mother. No matter what their role really is, that's who they really are. And, I had a friend like that. Because she was the head of the Chamber of Commerce in Berkeley Springs, she was like the mother to the whole town. And, so that's part. So when I was working on the Hill, I would get the birth data of everybody we interviewed for a job, because if you're putting together an office, what you don't want are people who aren't going to fit in.
Yeah.
And I don't care how sensitive somebody is while they're doing their interviews, they can't possibly know as much as I know without even meeting the person, because I'm looking at their charts. So yes, I think it could be very useful. Certainly, I would never hire somebody that I didn't know what their birth data was.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Well, and then here's the question as we start to wrap up this aspect of the episode. How do you find a good genie? Like, for somebody that doesn't have a you to do their chart. I mean, like, how do you identify someone who really knows their stuff and isn't going to BS you?
Well, there's a national, actually probably an international organization called the NCGR, National Cosmic Geo Research, and they have groups all over. That's who I do a lot of lectures to, those people. And so what I do, because I've pretty much retired from doing personal charts, is somebody will say, well, I saw that face.
I knew that one. I'm life change right now.
Who do I recommend them to? I would say, well, go talk to your folks in the NCGR group. There are probably a number of astrologers, and most of them, one or two of them, will be able to tell you who's really good, who's not really good. In Berkeley Springs, every year we have a huge psychic fair. I mean, we have over 200 vendors at our psychic fair.
Wow.
And so people will come in, hundreds of people come on the weekend, and they will just go from person to person to person, and lots of time, and pay $20 for a mini reading. And then they get a feel for, does this person have, is really good or not really good. So there are ways, but you definitely need to do your research. Yeah. And then, just like a good shrink, how do you feel about dealing with that person?
Yeah,
and so I think it because like you said, as we're kind of wrapping up this one, it's interesting. So the Sunday horoscopes, a lot of the stuff that you might see on the grocery line checkout is probably it's not really as in depth as backed by and so that's why when people read those things, they're kind of thinking, well, this is kind of worthless, because a lot of it probably is, I guess, what I'm hearing, right?
Right. Well, it's not complete enough to be useful. Now, what I do when I do my posts every day, I'm not talking about how does this affect a Leo, I'm talking about what the general environment of the day is. And I particularly talk about the timing things. So there's something that's called the void of course moon, which means that the moon is in the process of shifting signs, and there's a sort of a dead space. And I tell people, the day is not going to start till 10 o'clock. You may be slow getting out of bed. You may be stuck in traffic. So those are the kinds of things that are going to affect everyone, no matter what. So that's the kind of thing I try to talk about, or to say. My sister, who's a gambler, who likes to go to the casinos, I mean, she's got it worked out. What days are good? What I say that works for her to go gamble and make some money.
Well, of course, she shares with you, right?
Right. Really? Why don't I get a tip?
Yeah, really. I think you should. Oh, this is the perfect place to end. I'm so excited, and I'm so excited to talk to you again on our next episode, where we're going to go over what's happening in 2019. Because I listened to that CD twice, and I went, oh.
I know. That's how I feel.
Then I gave it to a girlfriend who listened like 3 times and went, oh. So looking forward to sharing with everybody. So anyway, Jeannie, why don't you tell people what's your website and how they can get a hold of you?
Okay, my website is starwv.com, and you'll see when you go to the website, there'll be something that says astrology predictions, and you can go there, and there'll be the daily post is there, as well as on my Facebook page, which is an open page. And when I start scheduling lectures, that goes on there. And how you can order the CD. If you need to get a hold of me directly, I am star@starwv.com.
Perfect. Yay. Thank you so much for coming. This was awesome. I can't wait to have you back. I am Kathy Gruver. I can be reached at kathygruver.com.
And I'm Jason Mefford. I can be reached at jasonmefford.com. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you on another episode of the Fire and Earth Podcast.